Welcome to this week's episode of Americans Abroad. This week, we don't have a guest. It's Jen and I, and we're going to be talking all about scouting trips. Jen, can you share your story about you and Brett and doing your scouting trips to figure out where you wanted to move to?
Yes, absolutely. So we first started planning that trip in 2016, when we were talking about moving abroad. And I was looking at Vancouver and Seattle. And, I know that Seattle is in the US, but it's like a different country when you live in Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
And we had never lived outside the South, really. We both lived in Ohio for a tiny amount, which, is the South of the Midwest. But we really had never lived anywhere else. And so we decided to visit Seattle and Vancouver. We were on a really tight budget, by the way. So for folks who have that experience, I'll tell you how I did it. And that is that for every holiday, we would give each other gift cards to either Airbnb or Southwest Airlines. And so that way, it just gave us more and more money over time that we could put towards our trip. I planned our trip for 5 days in Seattle, basically, and 5 days in Vancouver. And we were taking the train up from Seattle to Vancouver because that's just fun, right? Everybody loves to take a train with a big open view. So normally I book Airbnbs where you have the whole place to yourself, like a lot of people do. But in Seattle, they were, insanely expensive, especially if you wanted to be in any kind of neighborhoods that were centrally located. And the truth is, I really didn't at that point understand how to pick a neighborhood. The whole concept was so new to me. And so the neighborhoods that I looked up that looked popular, they were all very expensive. And so we found this one Airbnb that was in a couple's home, and they just looked so cool. Their names were Chris and Amanda. It didn't show their pictures, but it showed their place, and they had this huge library, and they had 3 cats, and you could hang out with the cats. And they had a room with a separate entrance. And I thought, that's perfect. So anyway, so we planned the trip around staying in neighborhoods and doing meetups with hobby groups so that we could get to know people there and what they might be like. And then also participating in our hobbies. Brett loves to go to the movies. He is a huge film buff. So we were going to check out the theaters in both places because that's really important to him. And then I love to cook. So we wanted to do grocery shopping to see, what the selection was like in markets. I mean, I knew it was going to be great, but it was still fun to check it out. So we booked it alongside, this is so long ago, but if you've ever heard of the podcast Pod Save America, it was a brand new podcast that we loved, and they were doing their very first ever live event. And so I got us VIP tickets to go see them. And we had to be there to check in literally like 45 minutes after we got to the home in Seattle. And sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but you'll be worried that you'll love the story.
There's a payoff, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. And so the thing about flying from places like Birmingham, if anyone who is listening is from not New York, Chicago, LA, whatever, Atlanta, you understand, but you don't get anywhere direct. So we flew to Chicago. We had a layover. I think we had another layover, maybe somewhere in Texas. And then we finally landed in Seattle. From there, we took the train to a bus and finally like an Uber, the last whatever distance. And we got to this home, and we had literally 15 minutes to get in, change clothes, freshen up, and head out the door to this VIP event after this, 9-hour travel day. And so we walk in, Chris, the owner, shows us to our place, super nice, whatever. And Brett goes, we're downstairs changing clothes. And Brett goes, do you remember Amanda Knox from Abu Ghraib. And I said, do you mean Lindy England from Abu Ghraib, or do you mean Amanda Knox from Italy? And why the are you asking me this when we
random.
have 10 minutes to turn around and get all the way downtown in a city we've never been in before?
Right.
And he goes, because this is her house. He said, I mean Amanda Knox, and this is her house. And I was like, what do you mean this is her house? And he goes, well, the owner's names are Chris and Amanda, and there are 50 copies of her books upstairs, and there's her picture on the wall. And I looked, and I was like, I don't have time to process this.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't even, we'll process it in the Uber.
I was like, oh my God. So, and the thing is, I just watched the documentary and not that long ago. And honest to God, I could not remember if she'd done it or not. I could not remember. So we get to the VIP event and I'm just buzzing, right? So I'm like, what is going on? And so we get to the front and they're like, hi, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm like, we flew all the way here from Alabama. We're staying in Amanda Knox's basement. And then that just set all the Pod Save America guys on fire. And they were like, oh my God, she did it. She didn't do it. And I was like, I don't know. I can't remember. So I spent like the whole podcast looking up the story. And the truth is, listen, and this is important. She did not do it. She was very victimized. She is an absolute doll. I love her. But at the moment, I could not remember. And she has a cat named Mr. Screams. The whole basement was full of bleach. I was like, and I will say, she is very sweet. She is so naive. Would you ever, after you had been through all of that drama?
I would be like, yeah, I would, if I was her, I'd be like, my name is Shirley, not Amanda. Yeah. Or I would just put it in Chris's name and like, we're going to take all this down.
Rent out rooms in your house, like the risk of it's just phenomenal. But so anyway, the next morning I wake up and I can hear them all talking upstairs. And I go upstairs and here's Amanda Knox, and she has made Brett avocado toast and a pour over coffee, and they're just having the best time. It was the strangest experience. And eventually they stopped doing it because I think somebody outed that they were doing it. And of course they were doing it secretly, but just the wildest experience. And being there, I thought, I can see how this happened to you because just
no situational awareness.
Exactly. Brett's like this too. It's just like nothing bad. I believe in the good in people. But listen, an Italian prison would take that out of me, I think. And she was a dog, like she was on the phone with her mom and they were bickering over who's taking care of the dog. And I thought, my mom didn't speak to me for a year and a half because I went out of town with my boyfriend at 29. I cannot even imagine all they've been through. And they're just having it was like nothing had happened. It was really inspirational.
Yeah.
But she was so fun. And to name your Mr. Fats and Mr. Screams, it was crazy. Bonkers. And then one of the nights we were really tired and we ordered food, Italian. And they delivered it to the front door instead of to the side door. And she brought it down and she said, I can't even, buon appetito or whatever, however you say it in Italian. And I will never forget Amanda Knox speaking Italian to me in her own basement and handed me spaghetti. It was the craziest thing. But anyway, I admire her very much. She is so interesting. So is Chris. They went on to get engaged, get married. She's doing a ton of stuff for victims' rights and whatever. But if you want to hear, this is the ultimate expat cautionary tale. Is the Amanda Knox story. So I feel like I had a brush with greatness early on. There you go. So moving right along to normal scouting trip discussion. What about yours?
Yeah. So I did the very first Expatsy scouting trip. This would have been March of 2024. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Two and
it's
a half
been
years.
2.5 years. Oh my goodness. That went by fast. I think folks, if you've listened to the pod before, you know that we started exploring moving to Portugal, Spain in late 2023 or mid 2023. And I found you on TikTok and would come to your lives, and you had announced we're doing this scouting trip to Portugal and Spain. And this was us also coming off of a year where I was top of my career game, but physically unwell. Marriage was stressed out. It was that, outward success, success has made a failure of our home sort of situation.
Mhm.
And I remember going to my partner and letting him know about this. And he's like, you should totally do it. Because we knew that I would be going by myself. So paid the deposit for the trip, or paid the fee for the trip. Uh, did both Portugal and Spain. Really not knowing just a little bit about some of the places that I thought would be my vibe. Braga, I was very very excited for, and so that was, I think, November of 23 is when you announced the trip and we're starting to take
Mhm.
reservations.
Mhm.
Back in the day, the trips were very different than they are now. I ended up grouping up with three other women, and we were like the travel buddies. And so we stayed in Airbnbs together. One of them is Rachel Mims, who is our resilience coach at Expatsy.
Mhm.
But we decided to bop around together, and we booked our Airbnbs. And I got on my plane in San Antonio, Texas, and had a connection in Madrid, which I will tell folks is the most cockamamie airport I think I've ever been to in my whole entire life. The plane was late, and also it was in a different terminal that had the same name as the terminal that I needed to go to, but it was a different terminal. So I was tired and
Sure.
confused. And I had a little mental breakdown on WhatsApp to all of y'all, going, I'm missing my flight to Porto because that was going to be the first
Mhm.
stop. And the next morning we were going to go to Braga. And I was like,
I
Braga's the
know, and
easy.
you were so excited
I
about
was so
Braga.
excited. I was like, I can't miss that city. Well, long story short, I was able to get a flight that got me there pretty late that night. Flew into Porto, went to Braga that next day, and immediately I was like, oh yeah, I am on the right track. Uh,
Mhm.
and spent a couple days in Porto before we were going to Lisbon. Ended up getting food poisoning on the last day there here in Porto before we were all riding the train together to Lisbon. So I ended up having an extra day at a hotel, puking my brains out. That was part of my scouting trip, was just me by myself. But I think it was also a great opportunity to go, look, I'm in a foreign land where I don't speak the language. I am unwell and I am capable of taking care of myself. And it's okay. I missed a
Yeah.
flight. I'm capable of taking care of myself. Things will just happen how they need it to happen. I ended up joining everybody in Lisbon the next day, and immediately Lisbon was not for me. I could see it being a very fun
Oh,
city.
interesting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was too much for where I'm at in my life now.
Mhm.
Uh, a few years before, we had thought about going back to New York City, and we had done a trip there, not so much to see if we could live there, but to visit some friends. And I remember telling Dave, oh, I could see why we were able to do this when we were in our early 20s. um, Late 30s, early 40s us are not early 20s us. I can't struggle like the way that we did before. And Lisbon felt like it was going to be similar, where cost of living was so high, we'd be working to be able to pay the bills, just so crowded. And it was like, Lisbon's not for me. So I got a tattoo, and that was my time in Lisbon. Went down to Faro. Beautiful, great place to relax.
Mhm.
Not for me.
Mhm.
I'm not a sun and sand sort of person, but it was nice being able to take North Portugal. I loved. The rest was just a chance to take in this information that I received, and there's no harm in like crossing things off of your list. I think if anything,
Yes.
that that
Agreed.
the trip showed me, okay, we have this small, but this wide country, this long country, and we could choose to move anywhere in this country, but where do we not want to move, so that way we can narrow down what that focus looked like. Went to Spain, fell in love with Bilbao, which was the last stop. So my first stop and
Mhm.
my last stop were these lovely little bookends of where we could see ourselves going.
Did you
Um,
get sick in Bilbao?
no, I was the only one in our group who did not get whatever respiratory thing that everybody else. I ended up
Yeah.
going to eat a Michelin star restaurant. It was supposed to be 8 of us going to that Michelin restaurant together
Mhm.
and I was like, "Cool, I'm gonna go collect me a Michelin star by myself." I was like, "This is my reward." But yeah, I got my sickness out at the beginning. I took one
Yeah.
for the team early on. But yeah, I
You're
mean, like,
lucky.
yeah, it was. I think the scouting trip that I did, it was a lot. It was drinking from a fire hose. It was what,
Yes.
7 cities in 23 days.
Yes.
Um,
And that seven cities that we slept in, there were plenty of other cities that we saw.
and you
Like
do
we
like a
didn't
day trip. Yeah.
yes, we didn't sleep in Malaga, but we saw Malaga. We saw
Yeah.
Murcia, which we didn't wasn't even on the agenda. We saw Villajoyosa. Like when you count it down, it was really more like 20 cities
Yeah, it felt like
that
a
we went
rock
to
band
see.
going on tour, going
It
from
was
bus to train, club, another club,
another
another
club,
club.
another club.
That's what it felt like. And the thing that I also appreciated about uh just the vibe of everybody there, no surprise, I'm, well on the spectrum and my social battery drains very, very fast. And there was a few times where I was like,
Mhm.
y'all go do that day trip. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. Or it's been
Yeah.
great hanging
And it
out with
was
y'all
fun.
until 2:30 this afternoon. I'm done
Mhm.
for the day. I will see y'all tomorrow. And nobody was like, oh, but don't be a party. It was very
Mhm.
much the ability to monitor myself. And I think that's one of the things that I, want to let folks know is whether you're going on an organized trip with Expatsy or you're doing this on your own, know your limits and know when you need to recharge that battery a little bit.
Yeah. I was so afraid, planning that trip. It was the first time I ever took people, and I had imposter syndrome beyond,
Hmm.
beyond. Um, but it was the best trip and the best group, and half the people who were on it like work with us
Yeah.
now.
IKEA
We
was
had
on that
such a
as
good
trip as
time.
well, who manages our
Yeah,
trips now.
Rachel, Michelle, Steve, and Kathy.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was a really special
Hmm.
thing, but I overplanned it because I was like, oh, I have to give them their $500 worth because I it was obviously a lot less
Yeah.
expensive because it was our first time and whatever else. And so I was like, oh, if I don't have it planned every single second,
Hmm.
you know, they're gonna come to me and be disappointed. Now I have much more realistic
Right,
expectations.
right.
But we saw so many places. Brett still, he's constantly like, where were we when we did such and
Have
such?
we been to insert little town or village here yet? Did we go through
Exactly. And
there?
I'm
I
like,
don't think we
yes,
have. Or
do you not
yeah.
remember? Yeah, that was Guimaraes. How can you not
Mhm,
remember that?
mhm. And
And of course,
yeah.
yeah.
One of the things about doing a group trip, again, I'm an only child, my social battery drained. You would think that I would be the worst person on a group trip like this. But it also helped to, number one, make me feel like I wasn't alone. That like, okay, here are all these other wackadoo people who are thinking about doing a
Hmm.
big brave wackadoo thing and we're gonna figure it out together. And then being able to maintain those connections as we were planning our move abroad, or the folks who are like, oh, we just started the visa process, or so and so got approved and they're getting on a plane in 2 months to start their new life, wherever they were moving to. And I think that I valued more than I expected to. uh,
Hmm.
Again, I'm a loner, Dottie. I'm a rebel. I want to do things on my own, and so having a little bit of that balance to be able to do that. But um, the connections were more than I expected, and
Huge,
more value in
huge,
that.
important. Yeah. And that's true of everything Expatsy does, right? Like we can't talk to you every day, but your person who went on the trip with you can talk to
Mhm.
you every day and you can work through challenges together. Um, so, how did you end up choosing Portugal over Spain?
For me, it came down to two things. Number one was with our situation and where we were at the time when we decided to go both feet forward on the visa process. The kind of the rules and regulations and the process were just going to be more streamlined with Portugal than they were with Spain. Basically, like
Mhm.
how I earned my income and how my business was set up, it was going to be much easier for Portugal than it was Spain. And then the second thing was, traveling through Portugal and then traveling through Spain, there were more places in Portugal that I could see us going to. So Porto was
Mhm.
still on the Braga was still very much in contention. We also started to
Mhm.
look into Coimbra being a
Mhm.
university town. And I was like, well, if we don't like Porto, we can go to Coimbra. And if we're tired
Mhm.
of Coimbra and we become the beachy little old couple, cool, we can go
Sure.
down to Faro. And for me, for Spain, it was Bilbao or nothing, or somewhere in that area. Yeah.
Oh,
So I was
interesting.
like, well, if we get tired of it or we want to just do something a little bit different, um, different strokes for different folks, but like Seville did not. I was like, this would be a great place to spend a weekend, but
Mhm.
I didn't feel it. Barcelona, very much like Lisbon, this would be a great place to come for a week and see all the things and do all the things and then go back home where it's just a little bit
Right.
more chill. So it's someplace where I could see myself walking to the market and walking the dogs and having a cafe. Just I'm very much a vibes. I'm very much a gut instinct sort of person, and the guts felt better
I
in
think that's
Portugal.
important.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
more places.
The vibes, you can't you can't get vibes from a YouTube video. So ultimately, when I tell my funny story, but the reason why I wanted to see Seattle and Vancouver is so dumb. But Brett and I lived in, an apartment complex that had a gym. And every day I would go down to the gym and I would walk on the treadmill. And on the treadmill, they had a thing where you could walk through different cities. And I loved it. Like it was a little bit of escapism. It got me out of Birmingham, whatever.
Right.
And my two favorite cities to walk through were Seattle and Vancouver. And that is what inspired me to consider moving to those places because I felt like I knew them like the back of my hand, at
Yeah.
least the stretches that I was walking. And when we got to those cities, it was completely different. Um, and, not for nothing, but one thing about Seattle, and, it's super expensive. My
Mhm.
joke is we have red state money, we don't have blue state money. And
Right.
so, we would really have to um, turn on our
Mhm.
incredibly competitive job seeking ambition at a late age that was scary to think about, more scary to me than starting my own company. I know everyone's different. But like in Seattle, and there were every place seemed so bougie and money driven, or it was hip and it was just like the weed smoke was so thick
Mhm.
everywhere. I am all for people. I don't care what you do. I do not care what drugs you do. I do not care. But I just don't like what's wrong with edibles? Why we got to smell it like everywhere? And so it also I just don't like it. I wouldn't want to smell cigarette smoke everywhere either.
Right,
And
right.
I was a smoker, don't get me wrong. Um, I was part of the problem, but I just didn't want to be around it all the time. And it truly was everywhere. It truly was everywhere. And it reminded me of like being in Redneckville, like being in Gatlinburg or something,
Mhm.
because that's the kind of experience you have in Gatlinburg, where it's smoke shops and tattoo shops and whatever. And again, I like tattoos. I don't care what drugs you do, but I still want, I also like art and culture and stuff
Yeah, well,
like
it's
that.
gotta
And
work
that's,
for you at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah. And that's how it felt. And it just felt, I just don't know. I have something about big cities where they, like, rural places can be really shallow and big cities can be really shallow. And there's
Mhm.
some Goldilocks in between for me, that I prefer. And then Vancouver, it just felt very cold and distant, and it just did not feel like home in any way. And then also it'd be very hard for us to move there.
Yeah.
And so when we went back to the drawing board, in 2020, 2021, it was New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. And we started outlining the visa paths that actually made sense for us. And then after we solidified that, looking at what we were looking for, and then finally visiting Mexico, I mean, night and day for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to poo poo on any place.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, I really don't, because everyone is different. Everyone's experiences are different. Everyone's needs are different. But whatever my personality plus my neurodivergence and whatever else, but we get to Mexico and it's, even Merida is incredibly modern. It's pretty wealthy, but it's still rough around the edges, And I find that I like that. I like that, that I don't feel like I have to mask. That means a lot to me. And we went out that first night. First of all, we got lost trying to get to our Airbnb. I mean, we could not figure out at all. And we realized we needed help. We had the Airbnb person wasn't responding. And so we saw a house that had Christmas lights. It was January 6th or whatever.
Okay.
And I said, okay, if someone has Christmas lights, they can't be mean, right? You can't be mean and have Christmas lights. Let's go. And we're in this huge neighborhood with like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes. So we go up to this home with the Christmas lights and I knock on the door. And again, don't forget, I speak no Spanish at this point, none. Knock on the door and I've got my Google Translate and I tell them, we're lost. Can you help us? And to show them the address. And now we know way more about how addresses work. But at the time, I mean, just clueless. And they were like, momento. And they were having a party and they went and found the cousin who speaks English and brought him out. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, it's okay. And like, just immediately wanted to help us find this place where we were staying. Then we go and find our place and it's like, okay, let's go to this pizza place. So we go to the pizza place. It's at someone's house, which of course we just had no.
Right. No.
Yeah. And it is 2022. They're all incredibly still very COVID conscious. So they give us hand sanitizer. You have to wear masks. They bring us in. And they had a full, huge wood-fired oven in their front yard. And we sat and ate gourmet pizzas in this yard. And I just felt so taken care of because they were concerned about our health and the fact that they, and I know the one thing was I knew all the food words, even if they were like French foods or because they had gourmet.
Right.
And so I felt in my element because I was like, I can figure out pizza. And it just was so heartwarming and I felt so welcomed. In Seattle, we loved staying with Chris and Amanda and they were dolls, but we weren't going to be living with them all the time. And the Seattle freeze is a real thing, where you meet somebody and they say they're going to be your friend and then they never become your friend. Whereas in Mexico, I mean, you have to work to not meet people.
Right.
And I think we needed that.
I think the thing that I'm hearing from you is I felt. And it was very much for me too, is I felt, you can create every spreadsheet in the world. You can create every pro.
Which we have.
Yeah, I think, we both have. Give me a spreadsheet. I'm in my happy place. But I think for people who are navigating their move abroad and they're thinking about, okay, well, where do I want to go? I think that this is partly why we encourage figure out where you can go first.
Yes.
So that way that can be your pro con list, and then narrowing that down and taking those places and letting that be the vibe versus leaning on vibes first and recognizing that you can't go, or leaning on vibes first and recognizing that this is going to be the steepest uphill climb for us to get there. And then you leave disappointed and it's like the one that got away. So, the feelings will come, lean on the feelings once you know it's an option. And I think that's a great way to approach it. Jen, do you know what time it is?
I love this time. My favorite time of every podcast episode when we get to answer listener questions. And as it turns out, I had a sneak peek at the listener question today. So I thought, what if I wrote a song that was keeping with the theme of the question? Would you
Okay.
like to hear it?
Yes. Give us your song.
Okay. Okay. I was feeling, kind of British, and thinking about what we're going to talk about. So it
Okay.
goes like this. This is the chorus. If you want to be my lover, you have to move abroad with me. Make it last forever. Let's expatriate. Beep, 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 beep. What do you think?
Love it. I absolutely love it. So
Perfect.
let's get to today's listener question. I wonder how many folks heard the song and are trying to figure out what we're going to be talking about. So today's question is: my spouse is excited about moving abroad, but I'm the one who's nervous. How do couples get on the same page without turning every dinner into a debate? And I want to shout out the person who gave us this question, because a lot of times we get the other side. I'm
Sure.
really excited about how do I get my partner on board? And so I just want to just give some credit to this person, because I think they're trying to get on board. They recognize that they're nervous. They recognize that they're the one maybe slowing the process. But talk to me a little bit about how to get on the same page with your partner or with the rest of your family as you try to navigate this move abroad.
It's a great question. And the first thing I would do is to say, nervous about what?
Mm-hmm.
I think that verbalizing what you're nervous about, and do it privately. Sometimes it can be, you know, embarrassing to say, you know what, I'm nervous that I'll give you one. I'm nervous that I'll be too fat. Because let's say I want to move to France and I weigh more than everybody in France. And I'm nervous that people might make fun of me, or I might not be able to buy clothes, or I might not be able to fit in whatever situation. So let's say that's a fear that I had. Well, that's something we can address, and we can address it by saying, okay, um, let's see if that's really true. First of all, that there are no fat people in France. Um, we could go to a different country if that is the case, because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Or we could work on your internal self esteem so that it doesn't matter to you what French people
Right.
think, because they can't help, whatever. So let's say that that's the first thing, is to really identify what's making you nervous.
Okay.
Also, if it's everything. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not everything. So sitting down and writing out in a journal, and even if it takes you weeks to think of every single thing that could be making you nervous. Maybe it's that, my partner will leave me. My partner, I'm going to move to Mexico, and my partner's going to fall in love with a beautiful Latina and leave
Mm-hmm.
me. There are a million things that you could be nervous
Yeah.
about. And the truth is, even your partners who's excited may have things they're nervous about. Now, what you don't do is go to them and say, this XYZ thing is going to happen. We can't go because this thing is going to happen. You have to use your I statements, and your
Mm-hmm.
partner has to be open to accepting your I feel statements so
Right.
that you can talk about them together. But debating has no merit. I use this example. It's not related to this, but when I tried to run away to France and found out I couldn't move there, I had my plane ticket to France. It was in the early 90s, and I remember my mom said, "What if this? What if you get kidnapped? What if this? What if the plane crashes?" And I finally just said, "Then I'll die," because I could not debate. Yeah, the plane could crash. It could happen. But your tendency is to want to say, Qantas never crash, to
Right.
come out and pull all these airline statistics and say,
Mm-hmm.
did you know that it's your chance of dying in a plane crash are less than dying in a car or getting eaten
Right.
by a shark or whatever else? But that's not the point. The point is that person is having a fear. Their fear is whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I'm not there to convince them otherwise, and it's their responsibility to deal with their fear. So it really is sitting down and talking about it, and also figuring out what you want in the US, and what they don't want. So you have to figure out what you're nervous about, what you're moving toward, but also be cognizant of the fact that the math of living in the US may be different for them than it is for you.
Right.
That could be for a million different reasons. It could be because they are not in a marginalized group and you are. It could be because they make more money than you do. It could be because they have more social support. It could be that they have more family. So it's a matter of working together. And the truth is, the same thing would be true if you decided that one of you wanted to move to Virginia and one of you didn't,
Right.
or one of you wanted to retire at 58 and one of you didn't. One of you wanted to have kids and one of you didn't. It's
Mhm.
the exact same
Yeah.
conversation. And ultimately, it is working together. Brett was very nervous, but he kind of he's real get along gang. So
Yeah, yeah.
it could be much harder.
Mhm.
What about you? Did you and Dave have the same feelings about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was very lucky that we were both down to, you know, Dave is very
Mhm.
much well, what's the worst that could happen? Dave is very much like Brett and like, it's gonna be fine. And I tend to be the nervous one. But one of the things that we did, even though we were relatively on the same page, was we would have a weekly appointment with each other and we would go somewhere else, so like a coffee shop or brunch. And so it was neutral territory.
Yep.
And go, so today we're going to work on the budget for moving abroad. And let's go
Smart.
through this together. Today, I want to talk about let's research the things like the hobby groups that are going to be important and get you out of the house. And what are the things that I'm going to do to make sure that I also don't just hold up in my apartment forever and ever. Let's research maybe a day trip we could take within the first month of moving. So just having these meetings with each other that aren't debate focused, that aren't here's why I want to move, here's why I don't want to move, coming something together that is a little bit more digestible. And again, having it on the calendar, which is very different than we're sitting down at dinner and my partner brings up a thing and it triggers something and now
Yes.
we can tell that we're butting heads. So when it's pre-planned and the topic is on the agenda, it makes it feel so much more neutral. And so I think both parties can come prepared with either here's what I'm nervous about, or here's what we can be excited about together, or uh, let's get down to the nuts and bolts if that's part of the nerves of, well, where are we going to live? What if, can I get medical care? Can I still take my prescriptions? Cool. Let's not talk about it tonight. Let's go for our Sunday coffee and like, let's research the meds that
Yep.
you're on and where the nearest hospital is going to be and what is the pharmacy like. And then we can come and discuss it together versus being adversaries in the moment.
I think that's brilliant. We used to have Brett and I get along really well, but there have been times where we didn't. And we used to have something, I think we called it blue time. I can't remember.
Okay.
But we would have like an hour on Fridays, and all of our grievances we would air then, so that it wasn't that bickering. Now, if you are in a situation where there's, sort of endless bickering, or
Mhm.
that's something to address in and of itself.
Right.
And if you don't want the same things, that's something to address in and of itself. And keep in mind, sometimes people do grow apart, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
I know that's hard, and that may not be true in this situation, but in some situations that does happen, and it is okay to grow apart, and the nature of your relationship may change over time, and that's okay. But I think that if your partner has any inkling, and it's obvious that you are open to it, or you would not just be being nervous, it would be, I'm putting my foot down and this is insane. First of all, you never would have written to us,
Yeah, you wouldn't
because
be
you wouldn't.
listening to this podcast in the first place.
No, you wouldn't care, and you'd turn it off. And I've been married to that type
Mhm.
myself. But the fact that you're interested is to compartmentalize it, like Stephanie was talking about, and then spend some time visiting potential places to enjoy, to just spend an average day demystifying it is essentially what I'm saying. And there's going to be some point, do your favorite things.
Yeah.
Where you're at dinner and you're having a great time and think, wow, if we lived here, we could do this every week, and start to replace your nerves with a vision of what the future could hold. I saw a meme recently. I shared it in our Facebook group that was like, don't forget to overthink the good things that can happen too.
That's such good advice. I need to take that one to heart for sure. Well, if you have a question you would like us to answer here on the podcast, you can email your questions at podcast@expatsy.com. Americans Abroad is an Expatsy production. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. Are you thinking about moving abroad? Start with our quiz at expatsy.com. That's expatsy.com.